Snow presses against the windshield like soft static. Midnight. The mountain road curves through silence. Nora Hayes, 32, leans forward over the wheel, eyes half blurred after a 12-hour shift in the ER. Her thermos rattles against the console. She's 15 minutes from home. Headlights carve a narrow tunnel through falling flakes until something massive moves into it. A moose, tall as the hood of her truck, stands squarely in the beam. Frost clings to its muzzle. Nora brakes hard. The tires skid, stop inches away. The animal doesn't flinch. It just stares, breath clouding the air in long, slow bursts. She taps the horn. Nothing. The moose takes a few deliberate steps forward, still blocking her. Then suddenly it turns and walks off the road. Relieved, Nora exhales, shifts into drive. When it returns, cutting across the headlights again. Once, twice, 3 times. The third time it stops longer, ears twitching toward the ridge ahead. Nora grips the wheel, pulse quickening. And then, low thunder from the mountainside. A white wall of snow collapses onto the road ahead, swallowing the lane where she would have been. In the silence that follows, only her breath and the moose's remain. Nora Hayes has worked 12 winters at St. Eira Medical Center, a rural hospital tucked against the Alaskan range. She's used to what cold can do to the human body. Frostbite, hypoxia, silence. It doesn't scare her. What scares her is losing control. Last year, an avalanche took one of her closest co-workers. Since then, Nora drives with the radio off, counting seconds between turns, measuring distance like doses of medicine. Rules, she believes, keep people alive, not luck, not signs. That night, the moose broke every rule she had. It didn't charge, it didn't flee, it just stood there, as if knowing something she didn't. At home, she replays the dashcam footage, a shape in falling snow, frozen mid-step. For a second, its head turns toward the ridgeline, not at her. Then the screen shakes, the avalanche hits. Local news reports call it a minor slide, but the map shows otherwise. The collapse covered nearly 100 feet of highway, right where she would have been. Nora wants to dismiss it as coincidence. Still, she can't shake the timing. 3 blocks, 3 warnings. So begins a quiet obsession. Was it random, or was that moose trying to tell her something? The story that follows isn't about miracles. It's about instinct, the kind humans forget to trust, and animals never lost. Because sometimes, survival isn't loud. It's just standing in your way. Morning seeps through pale curtains. Nora sits at the kitchen counter, the same thermos beside her elbow, untouched. Through the window, a blue-gray world lies still. Pine trees bowed under fresh snow, the road below half buried. Her cabin sits on the edge of Silver Ridge, a scatter of homes built for those who stay when tourists leave. Inside, everything is neat to the point of silence. Medication lists pinned to the fridge. Car maintenance logs stacked by the door. Order, her defense against what can't be predicted. A framed photo rests near the kettle, 2 nurses laughing in snow jackets. One of them is Lena, the colleague she lost last winter. The avalanche had come fast, soundless. They found the wreck of Lena's truck 3 days later, 6 miles from where she was last seen. Since then, Nora drives alone, works longer shifts, and sleeps lighter. Her ex-husband, a rescue pilot, had called it survivor's math, adding up blame until it equals 0. In town, people talk about Eira, the moose that roams near the ridge. Locals know her by the frost mark across her neck, a remnant from an old tracking collar. Rangers say she's cautious, oddly sight-faithful, often returning to the same bend of road year after year. That's the same curve where Nora almost died. She scrolls her dashcam file again, pausing at the frame where Eira's breath rises into the beam. The animal looks past her, ears angling toward the slope, almost like she's listening to something under the snow. Nora mutters to herself, "Coincidence," but her hand doesn't move to delete the file. Outside, A crow lifts off the power line, its wings scattering snow dust. The ridge stands silent, as if holding its breath again. 2 nights later, the ER runs late again. Frostbite cases from a stalled tour bus. By the time Nora clocks out, it's past midnight. The storm has thinned to a slow drift, but the road home looks untouched. She drives slower this time, headlights tunneling through steady snow. The radio stays off. Halfway up the ridge, her dashboard blinks. Temperature drop. Then, as the truck rounds the same blind curve, a shadow fills the light again. Eira. Same height, same stance. Nora exhales, gripping the wheel tighter. Not again, she mutters. She inches forward, horn blaring short bursts. The moose doesn't move. Its breath fogs the air, rhythmic, calm. Then, slowly, Eira turns sideways, blocking the lane entirely. Nora hits the brakes. Wind sweeps snow off the branches above. Somewhere distant, a low groan echoes through the mountains. This time, the sound isn't thunder, it's movement. Deep, rolling, like something inside the earth shifting. Eira flinches, ears flicking toward the ridge. Then, nothing. Stillness. Nora feels it in her chest before she hears it. A tremor. The truck shudders. Far ahead, white dust rises into the beam. Another avalanche, smaller but real, spilling across the bend just beyond Eira's body. Her pulse pounds. She puts the car in park, watching the moose retreat into the trees, snow closing behind her. Nora whispers to the empty road, half breath, half disbelief. "You knew, didn't you?" The question hangs there, unanswered, in the cold air that still smells faintly of pine and iron. Morning brings blue light and static silence. The avalanche from last night makes local news again. Another minor event, no injuries. Nora watches from the hospital lounge, her coffee cooling untouched. On her phone, she replays the dashcam video. Eira standing broadside, wind tugging at her fur. Then the tremor, the slide, the vanishing. Twice now, the same spot. Twice, the same pattern. She decides to call Forest Ranger Jack Ortega, a quiet man she's treated before for a sprained shoulder. His voice crackles over the line. "You said she had a tag on her neck? Frost mark?" "Yeah, looked like an old collar." "That'd be Eira 07, released last spring after a snare rescue. Big female, good memory for roots." He pulls her file. Movement data shows she hasn't left the Silver Ridge corridor for months. Jack mentions something else. Moose can sense low-frequency vibrations that often precede snow shifts. They pick it up through their legs, same way elephants feel quakes. "So, you're saying she could hear the slide before it happened?" Jack hesitates. "Maybe. Or she just doesn't trust that stretch of road. Can't say which." Nora hangs up, unconvinced. She dives into reports. Snowpack readings, slope angles, seismic data. All point to instability near that same bend. Still, one question gnaws. Why there, every time? She drives up the ridge during daylight. The plows have cleared most of the debris, leaving a pale scar across the asphalt. She parks, steps out. The cold bites hard. A few yards off the shoulder, she finds tracks, large, deep, clean edges, fresh. They circle a cluster of spruce before vanishing toward the valley. Nora crouches, fingers hovering above one print. The shape is almost perfect, undisturbed. She imagines Eira standing there last night, still and listening. Jack's truck pulls up behind her. "You shouldn't be up here alone," he says, scanning the slope. "Snow's unsettled." "I needed to see it," Nora replies. "She's been here twice. Maybe she's warning us." Jack gives a small shake of his head, half smile. Or maybe she just likes the view. But as they walk back, he glances once more at the ridge. "Still," he mutters. "Funny thing, she never blocks the same driver twice." Nora looks up, realizing she's the exception. And for the first time, she isn't sure that's luck. The call comes 3 days later. Jack's voice is tight over the hospital phone. "We lost signal from Eira's GPS tag. Last ping was 2 miles north of Silver Ridge. Same zone. Outside, the wind howls hard against the ER windows. Nora hesitates only a moment before answering. I'm off in an hour. I'll meet you there. By dusk, they're climbing a narrow logging road in Jack's truck. The snow is deeper now, glazed over from the last freeze. Pines bend under the weight, their branches snapping with small cracks. Nora rides in silence, eyes on the screen of Jack's tracker. A single dot flickers, then disappears. Battery's dying, Jack mutters. She's not moving much. Could be injured. They stop where the road ends. The forest around them is steep, shadowed, and soundless. Every breath forms a slow, hanging cloud. Jack shoulders a tranquilizer rifle. Precaution only, he says, and hands Nora a medical kit. You remember your distance, he warns. 30 feet minimum. Don't push closer unless I say. They move through the trees, snow crunching under boots. Then, a dark shape appears ahead, half hidden between 2 fallen spruces. Eira. She's lying down, flank rising unevenly, one leg twisted beneath her. A strip of old metal fencing juts from the snow beside her, rusted and sharp. Jack exhales, low. Must have caught herself on that. Nora crouches, gauging the wound from afar, bleeding light, not deep. Infection risk high. She readies antiseptic and gauze. Jack loads a dart, fires. Just enough sedative to calm, not drop her. Eira's breathing slows. They work fast. Nora steps close enough to see the old tag scar across her neck, the frost still clinging there. She sprays the wound, presses gauze with gloved hands. Her pulse quickens as she realizes how still everything has gone. No wind, no birds, just the quiet rhythm of 2 heartbeats, hers and the moose's. When Jack reattaches a fresh GPS collar, the animal stirs, muscles twitching under thick fur. Nora steps back immediately. Eira blinks, nostrils flaring, catching her scent. For a moment, their eyes lock. Not wild panic, just recognition. The same look from that night on the road. Jack lowers his rifle. You good? She nods. She'll heal. But she shouldn't stay near that ridge. They mark the coordinates, pack their gear. As they walk back, Jack keeps his voice low. Funny thing about her file, she was rescued last year from this exact stretch. Walked back within a week. Animals remember the safest routes, or the most dangerous. At the truck, Nora glances over her shoulder. Through the snow haze, Eira's silhouette rises again, steadying herself on 3 legs. She doesn't flee. She just watches them go. Back in town, Nora files a full incident report for the Wildlife Health Board. When she sends the footage, a biologist replies within hours. Behavior consistent with site fidelity. Possible sensitivity to subsonic snow shifts. Worth studying. It's the first time Nora sees the phrase possible sensitivity and doesn't dismiss it as guesswork. Because now, she's felt it. How still the air becomes right before the mountain breathes out. And she knows Eira felt it too. Snow drifts through the valley like fine ash. A week has passed. Nora returns to the ridge with the research team to check Eira's new tracker. She stays behind when the others turn back, drawn by a quiet pull toward the tree line. The light is pale gold now, the kind that softens edges and hides distances. Then she sees her, Eira, standing on the slope, her coat glinting faintly under the sun. The wound is closed, movement steady but deliberate. Nora doesn't move closer. She knows better. 30 feet between them, the right distance, the safe distance. She lifts her hand slightly, not as a call, just a small, silent greeting. Eira lowers her head once, slow and deliberate, breath rising in white streams. No sound, no sudden gesture, only that moment, 2 lives pausing inside the same silence. Somewhere far off, ice cracks on the ridge, echoing like a drumbeat. Nora glances up instinctively, but Eira doesn't flinch. The moose just shifts her weight, scanning the slope, listening again to what humans can't. For the first time, Nora doesn't try to explain it. She simply stands there, breathing with her. When Eira turns away, it's not a retreat. It's a passing of trust, quiet, practical, complete. Nora stays until the forest closes around the moose's trail. Only then does she whisper, almost to herself, "You're not lost, are you? You just know where not to go." Her voice disappears into the wind. In that stillness, she realizes Eira doesn't need saving. Maybe she never did. Maybe what Eira's been doing all along was teaching Nora how to listen again. The storm hits on a Sunday afternoon, sudden, brutal, the kind that turns daylight into gray static. At St. Elara, the ER fills with skiers and truckers stranded by road closures. Nora moves through the noise on muscle memory, triage, sutures, silence. Then a voice cuts through the radio chatter. "Rescue dispatch to all units. Ambulance 17 lost contact near Silver Ridge. Last known position, curve 2, elevation 940. Nora freezes. The same bend. She meets Jack Ortega's eyes across the hall. He's already pulling on his parka. "You're not going up there," a doctor warns. "Someone has to," Nora replies. "They'll never find the turn in this whiteout." Within minutes, they're back in Jack's truck, tires biting through packed snow. Wind howls down the canyon. Visibility, 20 feet at best. The wipers can't keep up. Halfway up the ridge, the world narrows to headlights in motion. Jack leans forward, scanning the GPS. "We're close, maybe 200 yards. Then, a shape. Massive. Motionless. Eira. She stands broadside in the middle of the lane, fur crusted with ice. Eyes glinting gold in the beams. Jack curses, slamming the brakes. "Not now!" The truck fishtails, stops inches away. Eira doesn't move. She simply shifts her weight sideways, blocking the fork in the road, the same fork that leads toward the cliff face. Jack reaches for the horn, but Nora catches his arm. "Don't!" Outside, wind screams through the pines. Beneath it, a deeper rumble, the kind she's heard twice before. The snowpack gives way with a dull roar. A wall of white breaks down the slope ahead, swallowing the fork completely. Jack stares, mouth open. The impact shakes the truck, snow pelting the windshield. When it settles, the entire curve is gone, buried under 10 feet of debris. Eira steps back once, snorting, steam curling from her nostrils. Then she turns away, vanishing into the swirling white. Jack exhales. She just saved our lives. Nora watches the snow still tumbling in slow motion, the ridge collapsing into silence. Her voice is calm but raw. No, she was saving her ground. We were just in the way. They pull the ambulance crew out an hour later, shaken but alive, stranded on the safer branch of the road. As dawn breaks, the ridge lies transformed, a jagged white scar where the curve once was. Nora stands at the boundary tape, staring at the frozen slope. In the distance, a single dark figure lingers at the tree line. Eira, watching. The moose lifts her head once, ears twitching in the wind. Then she turns, slow and deliberate, and disappears into the deeper forest. Nora doesn't wave. She just whispers into the rising wind. "You can stop guarding now." But she knows Eira won't. Not while the mountain still shifts beneath the snow. The avalanche leaves the town on alert for days. Rescue teams work around the clock, carving paths through the snowmelt and ice slabs that swallowed the ridge road. Miraculously, no one dies. The ambulance crew is treated for mild hypothermia, then discharged within 48 hours. At St. Elara, Nora files her statement, every line factual, stripped of emotion. Eira 07 observed obstructing roadway prior to avalanche event. Intervention prevented vehicular entry. No human casualties. But she can't leave it there. When the Wildlife Division reviews the footage, Nora volunteers to assist the follow-up team. She argues that the animal's behavior should be analyzed, not as myth, but as data. Jack joins her in the meeting. He backs her claim. Eira's GPS logs show repeated presence at fault lines recorded by seismic monitors days before each slide. The overlap is too consistent to ignore. The biologist nods, noting, she might be responding to microtremors or sound frequencies, a biological early warning system. For Nora, it's more than that. It's proof that instinct and science aren't opposites. They just speak different languages. Over the next month, she joins a pilot program, Human Wildlife Response Unit, a cross-disciplinary team tracking behavioral cues to predict environmental hazards. They install low-frequency sensors, map migratory pauses, match them with snow load data. Each night, Nora updates the database. Every time Eira's signal pings near the ridge, she notes wind speed, temperature, tremor readings. The pattern builds, so precise it feels personal. One evening, Jack walks by her desk. "You know," he says, "she's doing her part. You don't owe her more than that." Nora looks up from the screen. "I think it's not about owing. It's about listening." Later, she stands outside the hospital, snowmelt dripping from the roof like a slow metronome. The ridge glows under moonlight. Somewhere out there, Eira is moving. Steady, deliberate, tuned to the heartbeat of the mountain. Nora breathes in the cold and feels something loosen inside her. The guilt, the math of survival, the need for control, all quieter now. She opens her journal and writes a single line under the date. Sometimes, what saves you isn't a warning. It's being stopped long enough to see where not to go. The next morning, she submits her field report. Title: Behavioral Correlation Between Site Fidelity Moose and Avalanche Precursors. Beneath it, she adds a handwritten note in the margin, just for herself. Eira still holds the ridge. By late March, the mountains begin to thaw. The drifts recede into glassy streams, and the ridge road, what's left of it, reopens to service crews. The air smells faintly of pine sap and wet gravel. Nora joins the final inspection run with Jack and the biologists. The mood is quiet, reverent. They've come to remove the temporary warning markers and log the last data points before the forest takes the slope back. A soft ping from Jack's receiver breaks the silence. "She's close," he says. "Eira 07, quarter-mile northeast." Nora follows the sound through a thicket of birch, boots sinking into damp moss. The forest opens to a clearing beside a thawing creek, and there, bathed in the dim light of spring, is Eira. The moose stands steady on heeled legs, coat shedding its winter frost. The new GPS collar gleams dull silver against her neck. For a moment, neither moves. Only the water runs, soft and constant. Jack unclips the tracking unit, setting it on the ground. "We'll retire her signal," he says. "Let her stay off the grid a while." Nora nods, stepping back. She's earned it. As they finish the check, Eira takes a slow step forward, crossing the stream with calm precision. Each movement measured, powerful, silent. The collar light blinks once, then dies. Signal lost. Nora watches her disappear into the spruce line. The gap closes, leaving only snowmelt rippling where she'd been. Jack folds the tracker into his pack. "You think she'll come back next winter?" Nora looks toward the ridge, now pale and smooth under sun. "Maybe. But if she doesn't, that's how I'll know we did right by her." She turns for the truck, glancing once more over her shoulder. No sound, no shape, just wind moving through pine needles, the same quiet that began it all. For the first time in years, Nora doesn't feel the need to fill it. Some things, she realizes, are meant to walk away once they've done their part. A full year passes before the ridge road feels ordinary again. The barriers are gone, the sensors hum quietly under fresh asphalt, and travelers drive through without slowing, most unaware that they're crossing a place that once tried to warn them. But Nora remembers. Every turn, every pause, every look. She's still at St. Elara, though her schedule has changed. More field rotations, less night shifts. Her research with the Human Wildlife Response Unit is now part of a regional safety network. The data nodes placed along the mountainside are called the Eira system, small metal pylons that blink green when the slope is stable and red when it's not. She never asked for the name. Someone in the engineering team must have read her report and decided it fit. One April morning, she drives the ridge again, sunlight flashing off melting ice. The road curves, smooth and clear, but she slows anyway near the place she nearly died. The forest is quiet, no sign of movement. Then, just beyond the guardrail, she sees it. A set of tracks, wide and clean, pressed deep into the thawing ground. Old, but not too old. Nora stops the car, steps out. The air smells of earth and water. She follows the prints a few yards until they fade into brush. She doesn't call out, doesn't take a photo. She just stands there, listening. The wind stirs through spruce needles, and for a moment, she hears something that might be breath, or maybe just memory. She smiles, small and certain. "You kept your post," she says quietly. "That's enough." Back in the truck, she looks once more at the ridge mirror. A dark line of trees shimmers under the sun. Nothing moving except a slow wave of snowmelt sliding downhill. And somehow, that stillness feels like an answer. Freedom isn't escape. It's returning to where you belong, and being trusted to stay there. Nora drives on, the road opening wide ahead, the green light of the Eira node pulsing steady in her rearview mirror. Voiceover fades in over still images of melting snow. Creeks breaking free beneath the ice. Sometimes the wild doesn't speak in roars or cries. Sometimes it warns you the only way it can, by standing still, right in your path. Nora's truck winds down the mountain road, sunlight flickering through the trees. The Eira node lights blink gently along the curve, small and constant as heartbeats. At the hospital, a plaque near the emergency bay reads, "Eira System, in memory of instinct and those who listened." Nora passes it every morning. She never stops to read it anymore, but she always feels the same calm, a quiet, wordless understanding that she didn't imagine any of it. Out on Silver Ridge, a ranger camera catches brief movement, a moose stepping through new snow, pausing once at the edge of the forest, turning her head toward the valley below. Then she disappears into the trees. "Not all guardians are meant to stay," the voice says softly. "Some just make sure you know when to stop and let the mountain breathe." Screen fades to black, the sound of slow wind through pines. Disclaimer: do not approach or attempt to feed or redirect wild animals. If you encounter wildlife on the road, maintain safe distance and report to local rescue or ranger units. Respect boundaries, human and wild alike. This is Paw Prints and Stories. Stay gentle. The wild remembers. Wild.